Good afternoon, and welcome to the Charlotte Post Company's C-Suites conversation with Chris Jackson from Goodwill Industries of Southern Piedmont. My name is Nichelle Spears, and I will be your host today, along with Linda Johnson. I'd like to go over a few of our housekeeping rules before we get started. Please open up your chat and your Q&A that are located either in your upper or lower of your Zoom screen. The chat will be used for our team to communicate with you the various links pertaining to today's conversation. The Q&A will be used for you to ask questions during this conversation with our guest speaker. And please use the Q&A for your questions. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Linda at this point. Linda?
Thank you, Nichelle. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, as well as introduce you to our event team. We have with us this afternoon our publisher, Gerald Johnson, and Herbert White, editor-in-chief. And once again, I am Linda Johnson. I am the host along with Nichelle Spears. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. What I'd like to do, we have introduced you to our publisher. It's always a pleasure to have him join us today with us. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming out to our C-Suite conversation. We have a lot of them lined up, and Mr. Jackson is out first. Just a quick note about the Charlotte Post Publishing Company. We've been around since 1878, getting a start. Now, I haven't been around since 1878. I might look like it, but I haven't been. But we've been around since 1878 as an A-Lisa church publication. Became secular in the mid-1920s and actually went through several different publishers, and it ended up in my father's hands in 1974. He bought it after working for the previous publisher for about 5 years, and he ran it until he passed away in 1986. And lucky me, I got control of it with my brother. And here we are with the publication. We've expanded not only in Charlotte now, but we're in Durham Raleigh area with the Triangle Tribune newspaper, started a foundation, and basically we've taken the publication into the digital arena as well. And so we're doing a lot of things, and we're trying to do all of them well. And with that, we are doing a lot of things that we are doing for free, like these webinars. And so we would welcome the opportunity for you to subscribe to the publications, donate to the publications, or register for our newsletters. And I can go on and on and on, but it's not about me today, it's about Mr. Jackson. And I want to turn it over to Mr. White so we can get started with what we're actually here for. Mr. White. When you unmute yourself, we can hear you.
Technology, you have to love it. Thank you, Gerald. And my name is Herb White. I'm editor-in-chief at the Post. And you've heard a little bit of background about the company, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about C-Suites. And C-Suites is an initiative that we started a few months ago, basically as an idea to connect the African-American community to leaders in North Carolina's corporate community who are Black. And so it was basically an inspiration where we see a society that is having its reckoning in terms of race, in terms of corporate culture. And we wanted to come up with an idea where people can get to know the folks who are in decision-making capacities in this state, in the C-suite type of level. And we wanted to bring together folks to humanize the folks who are in the C-suites. We often think of corporations as these great big monoliths that don't have much of a connection on Main Street, and we set out to do something about that. And so today is the launch of the C-Suite series, and Chris Jackson of Goodwill Industries of Southern Piedmont is our very first guest for the conversation. And we welcome him and we welcome you to our conversation. So let's get underway.
Thank you, Herb. And to start off with, and again, thank you, Mr. Jackson, for being our first C-Suite guest. And I want to start off by just asking a general question. Now, when you were growing up as a child, I can't assume that you came into the dinner table one day and said, folks, I'm going to tell you that my dream is to become the president and CEO of Goodwill Industries in Charlotte, North Carolina. That didn't happen that way. So we want to start off as to how it did happen. Growing up as a child, where were you born? And just tell us a little bit about your childhood growing up.
Yeah, happy to do so, Gerald. Happy to be with everybody here today. Appreciate the opportunity to share, and I hope you all will call me Chris as we go forward here in our discussion. So I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up in the Germantown section of Philly with one younger brother. And to your point, Gerald, what I'm doing now was not even a glimmer in my mind, to be quite honest with you. And you know, the area of town that I grew up, very, very diverse area of town, on the lower income side. But one of the things that we had was we had community. And so I grew up with folks from all different backgrounds, you know, supporting one another and having a good time, to be quite honest with you. One of the things that I really enjoyed when I was younger was aviation. So I enjoyed space, you know, planes, the airport. I used to build model airplanes. And so the things that I mostly thought about at an age when I started thinking about those things was aviation. But I also was in a place as I started getting older where I was really unfocused, to be quite honest with you. A lot of things happening in my life, like happens in other people's lives as well. But those things that I was dealing with at the time caused me to really not be very focused. So I was let's say this, I was not a very good student growing up, not at all. And some of those issues I was dealing with led me to, you know, make some decisions that might have taken me down a very, very different path. And so one of those things was I decided to drop out of high school. I dropped out of high school when I was 16 years old and started working. Started working in a fast food restaurant. In fact, the first above table job, I should say, I had was a place called Boardwalk Fries. All we sold was French fries and drinks. But I got to learn a lot about myself, about customers, about teamwork, and eventually got myself together, went back and got my GED. And that love of aviation led me to a college in Daytona Beach, Florida, called Embry-Riddle University. And so I was extremely excited to be able to get into that school. I actually did start flying, but some of those issues I was alluding to earlier, I really hadn't dealt with. And so, you know, as I reflect back, I wasn't ready for that experience, and I wound up attending Embry-Riddle for about a year and a half, and left that school, moved back to Philadelphia, and started working again. So one of the things that I think often about is how did I wind up where I am? And one of the experiences that I had in Philadelphia was I had just about when I moved back, every job you could think of. I drove school buses, delivered newspapers. I don't know, Gerald.
And you gave up delivering newspapers?
Oh yeah. No. Hey, I used to, early mornings, I was out delivering them. And Gerald, you may remember these books. I don't know. There's a series of books called Beatrice Potter. They're children's books.
Yeah.
I sold those books door to door for a while. So, as you can tell, I was not very focused for a long time, but my wife and I had started our family by that point, and started really thinking about what was important to me, and what was important to me was my family. So I got myself together and applied for a position at a large financial services firm. That firm is called Vanguard Investments, and you may be familiar with a very large, one of the largest financial firms in the world. And I still remember the first interview I had, panel interview, 3 people, 2 young ladies and a gentleman. I left that interview thinking there is no way I got this job. This was financial service firm. This was a client service position. Again, at that point, I had a GED, had dropped out of high school and had an unstable work experience, right? And they called me later that day and said, "We'd love to offer you this position." And that started my real professional journey, which I'm happy to share a little bit more about. But that was the early part, up through my early 20s. So lots to explore there.
When you look back at it and to hear your story, one could safely assume that you were a late bloomer and not necessarily a CEO from way back when, from childhood, or some of the other stories that we hear about where people are groomed for the position. So it sounds like you are a bit of a late bloomer. What was the accelerant for you to go from where you were as being unfocused to getting on the track to becoming CEO of one of the biggest nonprofits in this region?
Yeah, thanks, Herb. And yeah, late bloomer, probably understatement, but definitely a true statement. I think 2 things happened. One, which I just alluded to, which was family. Family was extremely important to me. My parents divorced when I was very young, 4 years old, and my dad passed away when I was about 12 from multiple sclerosis. So, although I had a very strong extended family, my immediate family was, somewhat fractured. So one, just frankly speaking, was that I'd started my family. Actually, I'd met my wife, Renee, during that 1 year in college, and we had started a family. And so that was a motivation for me. The second was really my experience at Vanguard. And again, this is me reflecting back, because I didn't, realize what was happening at the time, to be quite honest with you. But as I reflect back, what I realize is that every step of my journey at Vanguard, and by the way, I spent almost 20 years at Vanguard. I started it in customer service in a call center, and I left as an officer running the Charlotte office, which is actually how I got this, how we came to move to Charlotte. But what I realized reflecting back is every step of my journey, there was somebody, or more than one person, really, that was, either a mentor, that I had reached out to, but maybe even more importantly, there were people who, had my interest, in their hearts and minds that maybe I didn't even realize, people who were sponsoring me, who were, thinking about and encouraging others to think about me in different roles. And one of the things I talk a lot about now, when we talk about Goodwill, I'll share some more, but the culture and the environment, and the idea of prosperity and access to opportunities and possibilities. So that is what I experienced at Vanguard. Again, entry level, didn't have a degree at that time. Panel, they decided to give me a shot. I start in customer service. I had a manager who was an African-American female, one of the few in the organization at that time, who encouraged me to be thinking beyond where I was thinking right there. Because to be quite direct, I was thinking about putting food on the table at that moment. I was not thinking about long-term career. I certainly wasn't talking about thinking about CEO. I was thinking about putting food on the table. But she encouraged me to think beyond that. And I'll just share a real brief experience. After I was there, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 8 months, something around along those lines. Part of what happened in that call center is the managers would listen in on phone calls, and then they would give you feedback. And if you've worked in a call center, you probably have had that experience. And so she did that. And during one of the feedback sessions, she stopped giving me feedback and said, like, Chris, do you enjoy your job? And I said, yeah, I actually am enjoying it. And she said, well, so why do you enjoy the job? What is it about this work that you like? And so I think about it and I said, well, I actually really like solving problems because, in a customer service role, that's typically what you're doing, right? You're solving a problem for a customer. And I really enjoyed that. And she said, well, I'm gonna tell you, you're good at it. And I said, oh, well, hey, thank you. I appreciate that. And she said, one of the things I observed is that your teammates come to you for help, and you haven't been here that long. And I said, well, yeah, I go to them too. We work. We have a great team. And she said, yeah, but they come to you very often. And I said, well, I enjoy that part of the job too, right? Help, I'm solving problems, I'm helping others. And she said, well, I would encourage you to think about management, because if you're one of the things that you need to be really good at, if you're going to lead teams, is to be supportive of other people and to be able to solve problems. And so that actually started my journey in even exploring leadership and management.
When you look at this, when you're talking about management and leadership, you've been at Goodwill since 2010. So you've got a pretty good amount of time in there, and you've moved up through the ranks. Talk a little bit about Goodwill, and it's a brand name. Everybody knows about Goodwill, even if they don't know what Goodwill is. So kind of walk us through what Goodwill is, and maybe even add to it in terms of what Goodwill does that we may not be that familiar with.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Herb. So, at the end of the day, what Goodwill is about helping people prosper. So we talk about the purpose of our organization is to help people see possibilities, to seize opportunities, and to prosper. And the way that we're doing that is partnering with individuals, our neighbors and community members who are looking to build their skills and competencies to move into employment or increase their capabilities so that they can move into new positions of increased responsibilities in their workplace or in another workplace. And I say partner because it's really focused on those individuals and their goals, the dreams and aspirations they have for themselves and their families. And so we help them with really identifying what talents and skills do they already have, what are their interests moving forward, and then what skills do they need to build upon to be able to achieve those skills. And so we have a heavy focus on career navigation and on skills development. And the skills development changes over time, but right now there's 3 main focus areas, and these are high demand occupations. So construction and the trades, we have a skilled trade center. And IT, we have a whole suite of IT training that folks can participate in, and then business services, customer service, and business administration. And then we also partner with them to understand what things may be getting in their way, and either directly or through a partner to help them with those things, whatever it is. And so the work that we're doing is really focused on those partnerships and long-term with strong relationships. And that's the mission of the organization. Now, what people primarily know about us is the how we do that. So the way that we're able to do that is by the generosity of our community. So all of those services I just described are at no cost to participants. The way that we're able to fund those programs and services is through the donations and the generosity of our community. So a donation you make to one of our stores or if you shop in one of our stores, or if you shop online, we sell items online now, that is the revenue that allows for those services to be offered at no cost or no cost to the program participant. It also allows us to employ almost 1,000 team members, and to provide them with development opportunities and to partner with them as well. So the mission is why we exist, and that purpose that I talked about from a prosperity standpoint. And then how we do it is the social enterprise, is our stores and e-commerce, and we have a couple other businesses as well. But that's at the core of what we're really about. It's really about prosperity.
When you were talking about this is interesting to me. You came to Goodwill in 2010. You got the CEO job in 2017. So now help us understand how you sort of rose through the ranks to get that job. I mean, just based on your previous experiences and dealing with people, sort of tells the story, but in terms of what actually happened to get you there, help us understand that.
Yeah. All right. Well, to understand that, let me fill in a couple more gaps on the employment side. So, at Vanguard, one of the things that was about the opportunity component of it is if you had a real thirst for learning, obviously you had to be doing, good things in whatever role you were in, and you needed to be working hard. That was important to the CEO that founded that organization. But also, if you had a thirst for understanding the business, then you had opportunities to move to different parts of the business to gain experience. And you also had a chance to participate in something they called Vanguard University. So, it was kind of getting an MBA through Vanguard based on, the different curriculum that they offered. So all that to say, I have a very broad based experience from my time at Vanguard because I led lots of different areas. Moved to Charlotte in 2000 to run the Charlotte office, and did that for 6 years or so, and then just had a real I want to say calling, I know it's cliche, but I had a real need. I wanted to do something that was more community focused. And I had been on the board of United Way for a period of time, and a position there opened up, and it was leading their community building area, which is supporting all of the nonprofits in the community, the allocation grant process. And so I led, I joined United Way. I led that process for about 3 years. It's when I found out about Goodwill. As you mentioned, moved to Goodwill, and my role at Goodwill was Vice President of Strategic Planning. Now you might ask, I just shared a little bit about my background. I didn't say anything about strategic planning. Right? So I'm not a strategic planning practitioner. That's not my, wasn't my core competency at that time. However, the broad-based experience that I had gained both at Vanguard and at United Way too, was real world experience in planning and in performance improvement, continuous improvement, and things of that nature. The other thing that I'll mention just real briefly is the reason I wanted to come work for Goodwill is when I found out what the organization was about. And by the way, when I joined, we weren't talking about prosperity. We were talking about jobs, and skills development, which is extremely important. But what I did know is a lot of the individuals that we were partnering with at that time, community members who were coming in for services, had a similar story to what I shared with you earlier. And something had gotten in their way, and maybe they didn't have the opportunity that I had at Vanguard. And so I, at that point, said, that's where I need to be. I need to be at the organization. And even then, Gerald, I was not thinking about, I want to be the CEO of Goodwill. I was thinking about that, the mission of that organization is what I have experienced in my life, and I want to be part of it. And so I started as Vice President of Strategic Planning, and had an opportunity to lead the strategic plan that actually led to the development of the Goodwill Opportunity Campus that's out by the airport now, and then took on a number of different responsibilities. And then when my predecessor was ready to retire, they did a national search, and I said, you know what, I think in order to have the greatest impact that I'm really compelled to have, and really, again, move this organization to focus on this idea of prosperity, I need to put my hat in the ring. And so that's what I did.
Cool. I want to go a little further with that, but we have a question here that I want to get in. From Benita Nance. The cost of training is free to participants, but is there an income qualification to participate in the training?
There is not an income qualification. And part of the reason for us not making income specifically is because we know that income is only one part of someone's life experience and current circumstances. And so there is not. If you come to us, we're going to talk to you about your goals. We're going to talk to you about what would be most helpful. And then, if it's a match, then we're going to partner with you to help you achieve those goals.
Okay, then just based on what you just said, help us feel how you are looking at moving the organization forward. I mean, I've got a glimpse based on your previous answer, but expand on that. What do you see going forward with your aspirations for Goodwill?
Yeah. So, well, let me share with you, to answer that question, Gerald. Let me share with you what's happened in the last almost 4 years. Okay. So again,
your leadership, correct?
So this is as I took on the role of CEO. So again, I was with the organization 7 years before that. But a lot of what I was observing, a lot of what others were observing, a lot of what we were hearing is that the work that Goodwill had done we've been in this community 55 years, a little over 55 years. Extremely helpful, have helped a lot of individuals. But one of the things we were hearing in particular from community was not enough, right? I'll describe that it was much more transactional. So somebody would come, through the doors of Goodwill, we would help them build a skill, and then we even talked about, we used the language job placement, which I try not to use as much anymore. And what we were hearing is that's great, but we actually need more because we know that next job, the first job or next job is probably not the one that's going to, help me, support myself and my family longer term. And so just before I took over, as part of that strategic planning process, we had focused on the fact that we really needed to be moving towards more of a relational services, and also that we needed to be moving towards the idea of family sustaining employment, again, defined by the individual, but that was going to mean some shifts. And so the shifts, frankly, just really started just before I took over. But what I realized and my team realized when I started, which was you can say those words, but you have to shift the culture and your processes inside the organization to make that a reality. So that's what we've been focused on. So that purpose that I shared with you earlier, helping people see possibilities, seize opportunities, and prosper, that was developed based on stakeholder feedback during my first year as CEO. One of the things that I realized was that I was going to need to do some exploring of my own leadership. My team would need to explore their leadership before anything else would happen. And we we partnered with a local organization called the Center for Intentional Leadership. And that has been really a game changer for the organization, for my own personal leadership, our leaders, our senior leaders. And that purpose has been a rallying cry because it has informed every decision. And again, the last part of that is prosperity, right? It's prosperity. And so we're still on the journey, but the change leadership that's had to happen, how we've had to change communication, both internally and externally. And I'll give you one last thing to answer this question, which is language. So up until a few years ago, we would often describe the people that we were serving, we were using that terminology then, by the circumstances they were dealing with, right? X percent of people have a criminal record, X number of people are unemployed. And what we realized is like, we need to be speaking and describing people based on their talents and their capabilities and not their circumstances. And again, it wasn't intentional. It was just the way we weren't the only ones doing that at the time. And so that's been a shift for us. And so when we're talking to employers, about, we have, thousands of talented individuals that we're partnering with every year who want to be part of a great organization and can meet your needs. And so let's make a connection, right? And so that's another big part of the culture shift that's happening.
And when you talk about culture, and obviously with C-suites, there's a corporate culture, even though, folks might not necessarily think of a nonprofit as a corporation, but it is. And when you look at it from that standpoint, talk to us a little bit about what that means when you talk about the corporate culture, and especially in a society where we're putting more emphasis these days on creating bonds with community, whether it's through inclusion or diversity, something like that. What challenges as CEO do you face, and does your team face, with this new dynamic in corporate culture?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. So there's maybe a couple parts to that. One is, Herb, you talked about, nonprofits, being businesses. I mean, nonprofits are businesses. They've got the same, just depending on the scale of the nonprofit, they're thinking about the same things. They're thinking about their customers and who they serve. They're thinking about their market and what are the opportunities. They're thinking about their team. They're thinking about leadership. Capacity, depending on the type of nonprofit, may be different. We are one of the larger nonprofits, and we're running for-profit businesses, really, right, to support the nonprofit mission is essentially what Goodwill is doing. So if you think about culture and how culture evolves, because you can't create culture, right? It's a culmination of all the people and stakeholders who experience and contribute. If you have organizations like ours who has been around for a long time, you have in some cases institutionalized practices, right? That need to shift with the times. I think for us, it's been a couple things. One has been, and this is well before COVID, but the need to be much more agile and think about things differently, whether we're talking about our business operations or we're talking about our service operations. They're really all parts of our business. That's a big component of it. We've been talking about equity or diversity, equity and inclusion for years. I think, what we're experiencing now is raised awareness, right? And, because of all the things that are happening in our environment and the things we're able to witness now that we couldn't witness, or more people can witness, let me say it that way, more people can witness than before. And so, this is part of our identity around prosperity, is the equity component of that. And so, looking at practices and policies and making sure that those things that have been around for a long time really are changed to reflect the intention that we have. And so, like lots of other organizations, we're right in the middle of that work right now, and it won't ever stop. It's a continuous process. But I think that combination of, we run this operation, it is a business, and that's how we run it. And you've got to think about culture shifts over time.
So how did the COVID impact Goodwill from a funding perspective and as well as from a service perspective to the community? I mean, how were you impacted and how did your leadership direct the company to handle these problems?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a year and a half ago, who was thinking that anything like this we'd have to be dealing with this, right? And thank goodness we've got some light at the end of the tunnel. For us, we started with when we realized that this was going to be an issue, and at the time we didn't know how big, right? So just a little over a year ago is when we first started realizing, like everybody else. And the first thing that we did was talk about some principles that were connected to our values and to the purpose of the organization, so that as we needed to make decisions that we weren't even sure we would have to make at that time, we had a framework for making them. And so, as you might expect, and like other organizations, but for us, certainly that led with people, it led with a safe environment. And then the business component of it was related to making sure that we could come out the other side, whenever that would be, right? And so, like others, we had to completely shut down our operation for a period of time, and then have slowly, been able to bring it back online. One of the things I could not be more proud of the team is that we were able to move most of, maybe 80% of the services we were offering in person to virtual within 3 days.
Whoa.
Yeah, essentially 3 days. We closed on a Thursday and 3 or 4 days, and on Monday we were open virtually, and so have been operating primarily like that ever since. We're back to offering some limited in-person services. The other thing I'm really proud of is that although it was really challenging on our team, is the resilience that they've had and being able to, to shift the way that they work. Staying connected has been really important. There was a period of time when we closed everything that we were able to continue paying wages for a period of time. And then when we couldn't do that for an extended period of time, people kept their benefits. And we've been able to bring back over 90% of the team, probably closer to 95%. But it's impacted people, which at the end of the day, that's what the business that we're in. And so that's been tough, but really proud of the team. And we've kept the services going and doing very well now. And our community has continued to support the work through, shopping and donating. It's been actually really phenomenal.
When you have, when you talk about leadership, obviously no one does it in a vacuum, but from your experience, and you don't have to use yourself as an example if you don't want to.
Why not? Use yourself.
But what to you makes a fitting, if not great, CEO?
All right, that's a good question, Herb. I think I'm going to use the people that I have worked with and admired to frame this question. So, and I'm going to use the example of Vanguard to start with. So the founder and CEO at that time of Vanguard, his name is Jack Bogle, and if you follow financial services at all, you know that name. and kind of a legend in financial services, right? He created this organization called Vanguard. And so people knew him as a great financial mind, okay? But what I came to know about him was how committed he was to people. So he was a great listener. If you passed by him in the hallway, he was going to stop and engage you in a conversation. Before there was 10,000 employees, he knew your name. If you were sitting in the galley, it was called the cafeteria, and he came in for his lunch, which he did almost every day, he would ask to sit down with you and he'd have a conversation. And so he was all about people. And so the thing that I experienced at that organization, and it's not like I didn't experience some challenges, I certainly did, but the culture was really about helping people prosper at the end of the day, and creating those opportunities. And so my experience has been the individuals who are the best leaders are those who really focus on people, and it's never about them. And again, in my experience, what I have found is that if you do that, then the business results will be positive. Now, I also have experienced, CEOs have to be, be able to build consensus, and they need to be able to make the tough call when the tough call needs to be made. One of the experiences, several times I've had this experience where, I'm in a room, just over the course of my career journey, and maybe my voice isn't being heard for whatever reason. One of the things I have found extremely powerful is if you can build consensus with whomever's in the room and have those people, even who maybe disagree completely with you or don't respect you or whatever it is, if you can help groups get to a common outcome, that's really powerful. So to answer your question, those are the things that I have seen in others that have influenced what I hope I demonstrate, but I at least try to, and I think are positive things.
And also,
Go ahead.
my follow-up to that is when you look at the landscape of businesses, whether they are nonprofits or for-profits, there's more emphasis these days, again, on inclusion and equity. And there are more folks who are clamoring for that representation in C-suites across the country to be more reflective of the country. Where do you think corporate America or even nonprofit America is in terms of making the turn or taking seriously those calls for more representation in corporate leadership?
Yeah, I think it's more prominent now than it's ever been. Even just in the last year, I think there are very, very large organizations that have said that this was an important part of their values, and have started to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak. We still certainly have a long way to go, but I feel probably more optimistic now than I have before. And I'll use the nonprofit community just as a start. Whether you're talking about, well, let's just take Charlotte. Take Charlotte for an example. We have lots of nonprofits, and up until the last few years, and still today, but up till the last few years, very, very few people of color were leading any of those organizations. Okay. And in the last couple of years, and even the last year in particular, boards of nonprofits are saying, like, this is important for multiple reasons, and we're gonna really make sure that the interview pool is diverse, If we can't find an interview pool that's diverse, shame on us in round one. We're going to wait and go back out. And so I've seen more people of color, both men and women, moving into leadership positions of nonprofits in just the last several years. Again, lots of work still to be done, but I think people meaning the leaders, and in this case, board leaders, are being much more intentional. And I think part of that's because the community is, really demanding it. And so, again, lots of work to do, but I think progress is being made.
And that's good for the bottom line, is it not?
Well, Herb, there's one of the things that there is no question. You can look at any study of data that says that the more diverse your leadership, your organization, the better your decision making, the better it is for the bottom line. So, you can make that argument. I like to also say, like, look, this is also about the heart, as well. And right. And so you got to make both arguments. I think you got to make both arguments for sure. But there's plenty of data out there that demonstrates, there's also plenty of data out there that says, some of the misconceptions that are out there are not true. I'll just use nonprofits as an example. There's an organization called Equity in the Center that took a study that was done a couple of years ago and took all of the things that were said about people of color as it relates to nonprofit leadership, right? Didn't have the education or experience, didn't have the network, didn't have the interest, was another one. And there's others, and basically disproved all of those points to say, like, let's stop talking about that because the data demonstrates that that's not the case. And let's you explore what the real issue is. So anyway, yeah, it definitely is better for the bottom line.
Now, you are, if I'm not mistaken, you are the first African American to head up Goodwill. What are the challenges? Just what are the overall challenges, including being the first African American heading up this organization? Are you running across, if any?
Yeah. So let me put that into context for you. It is true. I'm the first person of color to lead this Goodwill. My predecessor was here for 42 years. So this Goodwill, this Goodwill has only had a few CEOs. But just a little context. So Goodwills, each are local community-based organizations. So Goodwill Industries of Southern Piedmont, our territory is basically the Charlotte metropolitan area, so 18 counties. There's 155 independent Goodwills across the country, okay? And then there's a national organization called Goodwill Industries International. So we're a federated model. We have our own local CEO, local board of directors. There's a national organization that focuses on best practices and branding and skills development. And then there's, requirements that we have to meet to continue to be Goodwill organizations. So across the 150 some odd Goodwills, there are 8 people of color who are CEOs. And 5 of those were hired in the last several years. Okay. And so I just wanted to put that in context nationally, right? So these are autonomous organizations. But so now there's been over the last couple of years a very heavy focus nationally on the equity and inclusion side, and that has led to some of the more recent hiring of CEOs, who happen to be people of color. And so to answer your question, Gerald, I think that for me, the challenges have mostly been related to making sure that my voice is heard. And it's a delicate balance. I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were debating actually, because this person felt like you always needed to be very assertive and make your point known. And if you needed a butt heads, you needed a butt heads. And I said, well, there are times when you need to do that, and I have done that. I said, but my experience has been focus on. It's kind of like chess versus checkers. Like focus on what you're trying to get done, what you know to be true, what you know is going to be positive, and then play your chess game, right? And you choose when it makes sense to butt heads, or when it makes sense to build consensus or do something a little differently. So the challenges are more related to just making sure that my voice is heard and in the room and respected. But I think you have to play, you got to play chess. And again, my experience.
We have a hand up that,
Oh, we actually have a couple of questions too.
The questions are there, no hands up.
You want to take one of those, Gerald?
okay, did you have a mentor throughout your journey to becoming a C-suite executive? That's from Trina Fuller.
Yeah, but not one mentor. I've had different people at different points in time that I would consider mentors for sure. And as I was sharing earlier, in some cases that was a formal mentor relationship, but more often than not, it was informal. Sometimes that was like my first manager who took some interest in me. And other times it's been people that I have sought out because I've respected their work or the way that they worked. But yeah, I've throughout my career, I've had mentors, and I used the word sponsorship earlier. That's sometimes it's not the people that it's the people that you come to find out later. Had your back, so to speak. And so I also know that there's been people who advocated for me based on my working capabilities. They weren't mentors, but they ultimately wound up, helping me, move into a different role or something of that nature. And I'm sure there's people that I don't know about either, but absolutely, I think it's really critical.
They were your champions.
They were champions. Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And then we have Jose Wilkins ask, as these companies look to grow diversity, what is being done for retention? Great question.
Oh, that's a great question.
Hey.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Again, I only speak from my experience. I think one of the things, and it's related to culture. I think one of the things we all need to do is be thinking about what is the environment that we are creating for our teams, and do we need to do something different as we're trying to attract different and diverse, a wide diversity of people. And whether we're talking about people of color, which we're talking about right now, or we're talking about different generations, the idea that you have to be open to changing your corporate way of doing things to embrace people. I talk a lot about belonging, and others are talking about that as well. But for me, belonging means that there is a connection for you as an individual to the work that you're doing and to the people that you're working with. And if you can't bring your full, yourself, authentic self to the workday, then you're not going to stay there very long. And so, the thing I think is most important is to be open to listening to what that environment needs to be for the team that you're bringing on board, and then be willing to make those shifts. And those people should be at the center of helping to make those shifts.
One of the other things too, and I know you've helped other people to navigate their professional journeys, but what would you tell that 21-year-old who might be in college, or that 25-year-old who's looking to really accelerate and get to where you are? What would you tell those folks that they need to be able to do to get the kind of professional fulfillment that you've been able to accomplish?
That's a great question, Herb. Again, maybe answer that in two components. So one, it's a really special thing when you finally are clear about your purpose and you can align whatever that is with the work you're doing. Now, that didn't happen for me until I got to Goodwill. I was happy in my other roles. I was, doing well, had great all those kinds of things. But right now, this is the work I'm supposed to be doing. And so, exploring what really is your purpose is something to continuously do. Now, whether you're able to identify what that is in your early 20s, you may not be, but at least start exploring it. The other thing with just in terms of my experience, which is really the only thing I can share, is there's a couple of things I think are important. I alluded to them earlier. I do think having a thirst for learning and demonstrating that. So when you're working, the more that you can know about the business and not just the specific job you're doing, the better actually you'll wind up in your current job, but also you'll be more valuable to the organization because you've got a broader context for what's happening. And I have found that people will notice that. So I think a thirst for learning about the broader context of the business. I definitely think the building strong relationships is important just across the board. But if you can take that to actually being able to build consensus and solve problems, use that to solve, whatever the business problem is, I think that's a third. And then, look, I think, again, my grandmother way back when used to tell me just a couple things. She was like, Jackson, a couple things I'm going to tell you. One is you always need to work hard, right? It is one thing that nobody controls it but you, right? Just work. And she actually would say to me, look, I love you. And you're a smart young man, but there's going to be other people who are smarter than you. There's going to be other people who have more money than you. They might even be more talented than you, but don't let them outwork you. So I think hard work, is important. And then she also talked about the, learning, taking every opportunity to learn. But the third thing she always talked about was, and lots of grandmothers talk about this, right? Which is like, be good to other people. Just be good to other people, right? Be kind to other people. And that goes a long way. So anyway, that's what I would say.
It's almost time for us to go, but I'm gonna let Jose get one other question in here that he's put out, and it's, does Goodwill help senior professionals save from oil and gas, help make a career transition to a different industry like banking, healthcare, etc.?
Short answer is yes. A big part of what we do is help people who are transitioning, either because they have to transition to other employment, either because they have to, or because they have an interest to do so. And so I would just say, the best way to connect with us, go to our website, which is goodwillsp.org. All of the information about our services and programs are there. There's a way for you to engage with the team and let them know that you're interested. There's a phone number there if that's more helpful for you. But definitely reach out and we'd be happy to help.
Well, Chris, I can't say enough about this interview and the nuggets that you shared that would go a long ways, because just talking about growing up and your career path has been not only informational, but inspirational. And this will be recorded, and some young people are going to be able to see this, and it's going to uplift them to try better and harder, because a lot of us have a mindset that to get to the top, you have to have a certain background, a certain type of education, certain this and certain that. And one of the things that we are trying to sort of get dismissed out of people's heads is that you can get to the top if you want to get to the top. And I think you are a great example of that. So we want to thank you for giving us the time today and telling us your story. And it's been very, very informational and inspirational for me anyway. I can't speak for anybody else, but for me, it's been very good. So thank you, my friend.
I appreciate that, Mr. Johnson. And I don't know if y'all can see the poster behind me. That's Muhammad Ali. And I don't know if you can see the words, but the words say impossible is nothing. That's how I try to live my life. And so hopefully this has been helpful.
Good deal. I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle and Linda to close us out, but thank all of you for attending as well.
Mr. Chris, you've been a busy man.
Yes.
I love your journey. Love your story.
Yep. Thank you for sharing with us. Let's see.
Okay, here's a list of our upcoming C-suites. If you're interested, you can always go to our website where you can find all of the information and dates and times. And from there, we also have upcoming events on our calendar. We have the George Mason Mortgage is doing first-time home buyers on Tuesday, April 13th. And they're also doing one on Tuesday, April 20th, is a week after. And then we have our Charlotte Post Foundation Post Best Banquet. And it'll be a virtual banquet, which was rescheduled from 2020. And that will be April 17th at 6 p.m. Hope you can join us. And then we have Better Sleep Simplified with Dr. Jason Wooden. And that's also a great event on Thursday, April 22nd at 6:30. The details for all of these events can be found on our websites, which we have been posting. They're in the chat and they're also on slides. And this is our contact information, where you can find all of the events, or if you want to subscribe to the Charlotte Post or the Triangle Tribune, they're both there. And you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can, we have podcasts, sponsorships, subscriptions, print e-editions, and webinars. So you can find that on any of our websites, or you can always call us. Thank you, and this has been a great day. And this, Chris, you've been an inspiration.
Yes.
And thanks for being with us. And thank all of the attendees for being with us as well. Thank you, and have a great Easter. Happy Easter, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, happy Easter.
A moment.